Welcome to another episode of Relentlessly Resilient, where real people share real-life experiences and the tools they've developed to move forward and live their best life. I'm Michelle Scharf.
And I'm Jennie Taylor. And Michelle, today, I think we are both so excited about this guest that's agreed to join us.
Yeah.
I haven't known her very long. We'll introduce her to you really quickly, but I've attended several events where we've been together with our families and our paths have crossed. And from the second I first saw her and every time I've seen her since, she just has a beautiful air of joy about her and a smile from ear to ear. And just really, it's an air about her of happiness and confidence and optimism even before you ever talk to her. And then as you talk to her and you hear more about her story, you think, oh my gosh, teach me how you do this, because
you gave me some highlights early on when we first started talking about this podcast about this woman. And I have been dying to hear this story. So yeah. I can't wait.
Heads up, Michelle, this is probably a good 2 or 3 or more episodes because we want her to be able to tell her story and not rush through it.
Right.
And so we're going to kind of take it in segments. So our guest today is Tiffany Vendela, and she is the wife of a United States Army soldier, Travis Vendela, who was catastrophically injured in 2007. So that's 13 years ago. And she's going to tell us her story about how she and Travis met, how they were dating and actually engaged at the time he was deployed, and then what happened when he had this catastrophic injury. Now, catastrophic is really bad. You know, it's the kind of injury that she's obviously grateful he's alive, but she's going to tell us a little of this journey and what happened immediately. Again, we're not going to try to walk through the whole 13 years that have happened. We'll take a couple episodes to get there. But Tiffany, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Thank you for sharing your light. Even though this is like a radio interview, we can still just feel through the phone how you approach life. And we're really excited to learn your story and then some of the tricks you've used, because you've inspired so many of us already.
Thank you so much for having me. I am Tiffany Vendela, and I have to take you back probably to 9/11. And I think that seems kind of far back, and I know we weren't going further than 20, so it's coming up on 20 years. But when I was on September 11th, I was in my dorm room in South Dakota, and I saw the Twin Towers get hit. And of course, all of us remember where we were at that time, because it was a huge tragedy for our country and for so many. And I think I remember that day so sad for the people who were there. I had no connections to anybody in the military at that point, so I felt horrible for everybody who was involved. But for me, I didn't feel that someone was very close to me affected. And little did I know that day was actually going to change my life drastically in many ways, good and bad. So I will fast forward to 2005, March of 2005, and I had transfer schools. I'm a Wyoming girl. And so I was going to the University of Wyoming, and I had a best friend, and she said, "Hey, my cousin's coming. He just got back from Iraq. I want you to meet him." So I love meeting people, and I love people in general, so I was really excited. I love to work out, and I just got done working out, so I was sweaty and gross, and I went running up into my best friend's apartment, and Travis was there. And so since it was my best friend's cousin, I was even super excited. Awesome, we have a hero here. I'm excited to meet him. I bounced in, and he stands up, and he's still in his uniform. He had just gotten back, and they made him go on leave. He didn't want to leave. Trey loved the Army. So I call him Trey as well. So I know his name is Travis, but he goes by Trey. Trey loved the Army. He loved what he did, and he didn't want to leave, but they made him leave. And so I'm really thankful. So I went up and I said, "Hi, I'm Tiffany." And it's kind of funny. We laugh about our first meeting because he turns around, he looks at me, and he goes, "Hi." And he turns around and sits down. And I thought, oh my goodness, that was really weird. Like, he didn't want to talk to me. And I'm sure if sometime you have him on, he thought, okay, I'm this Army guy. I'd been in Iraq for 18 months. And he turned around and he saw me, and he thought, he tells me he fell in love immediately when he saw me.
And he just didn't know what to do with it. So he had to hurry and turn around and look away.
Yes. And so my best friend and I knew each other's schedule like the back of our hand. And I would talk to her daily. We lived across from each other. And he stayed for he was going to stay for a week. And a few days as we went along, feelings grew. And we started spending more time together. Well, he was going to leave and he was going to go visit his mother, which I think everyone should. And he got 2 hours outside of Laramie where I was at, and he turned around. And so instead of staying a week, he stayed a month. And our love grew from there. And I was actually about to graduate my undergrad degree in kinesiology and health. And I was accepted to the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks, North Dakota for physical therapy school. And he went back to Fort Hood where he was stationed. And we did the long distance thing. At that point in my life, I kind of was over guys. I was treated poorly by many of them. So I was going to go and focus on me. I was going to become a professional. I wasn't going to be brought down by any guys. And it's kind of funny because both of us didn't really match what we had in our head for who our future spouses was. So if you said, you're going to marry Travis, I would have been like, nope, there's no way. And I was blonde at the time, and he wasn't really attracted to blondes at that time. So we were thinking, no, this doesn't match who we think we're going to meet. But I got to know Travis as a person, and he really won me over. I was a virgin at the time, and I had dated many guys in the past that told me I was somebody they would want to take home to mom and dad, but not date. So at that point, I didn't really know what it meant. And I was turned down a lot, but it turns out they wanted something different and not just a relationship. So that's what made Travis so special, is he respected me. He respected my values. I never felt pushed. And for once in my life, I had a guy who put me first. And he was such a caring, loving, and selfless person that I just couldn't help but fall in love with him. And so he blew up my whole plan of not having somebody. So I moved to North Dakota to start my PT school, my physical therapy school. And he was stationed in Fort Hood. And I was in a new place. I hadn't gone around a whole lot. So he said, I want to come up and help you find places and get comfortable. So he drove all the way from Texas, all the way to North Dakota. And I had made it very clear my standards, and he's super respectful. And I was very thankful of that.
That's awesome.
He came to North Dakota. He had a Jeep and he took off the top. So it was kind of funny. He wasn't wearing a shirt. So he had a really bad sunburn with a line down his chest when he showed up. And he was there and he helped me figure out where the school was, place to go. He just wanted to be there so that I didn't feel scared or worried, and to see me. So the next few months, I started physical therapy school, and it's very challenging and it's very time consuming. And I think as you are in a relationship, it's important to be close together. But I feel like we were so blessed in a way to be able to communicate through phone and no physical presence, because we really got to know who each other was. And I got to focus on my studies, and we got to grow our relationship in a way that I don't feel like we would have been able to do if we were present with each other. So we met in March, and then that coming November, I came and went and visited him in Dallas because it was a short weekend. So he flew me to Dallas. We looked at rings. It moved really, really fast. And we decided we were going to get married. I didn't know when it was going to come. He had not met my family yet. And at that point, I think I had met his. But it was really quick, and I never really wanted a very quick relationship. But I just knew in my heart that he was the one. And I know a lot of people, when they find their person, they just say, I just knew it. And I knew it with him, and he knew it with me. And so that leads us to sorry.
I was just saying I can certainly relate to that. And I think, well, Jennie doesn't have exactly the same story, but it's, when we find our people, it's really, for some of us, we just know, right?
Yeah. And Tiffany, I love hearing you talking about the relationship you were able to build with Travis that might not have happened had you been able to hang out together all day. But when you're forced to be separated from each other and to talk to each other and to really kind of take it to a deeper level of getting to know each other, tell us then what happens. You're looking at rings. At some point, we know you get engaged, and at some point, we know that distance goes not just from Texas to North Dakota, but you're here and he ends up back in Iraq. So walk us through that a little bit.
So we end up getting engaged Christmas Eve, and then we separate ways. And he was going to be deployed in October. I was able to say goodbye. I was able to fly out a few weeks before he was able to go. And it was really interesting because when you get ready for your loved one to be deployed, you have a lot of fears, anxiety, and a lot of unknowns. And at that point, I was very naive in how I would experience what was going to happen. But I remember turning around and looking at him before I went through the gate. And I'm sorry, this vision of him or him standing there, I think will forever be ingrained in my mind, because that's the last time that I saw him with legs. And he was very stoic and he was very happy. And that vision for me of seeing him that way helped me through a lot of what we were going to come through in the coming days or months. So he got deployed in October, and I continued my studies, and he would call periodically. That was not when they could call on a cell phone. He had to stand in line to get...
and use a calling card.
Anybody
remember a calling card?
Yeah, right. And have to write a letter on a computer, but you'd have to wait. So I would hear from him periodically. Is this a time where they're going to have a commercial, or should I keep going?
No, let's pause right there. So Tiffany, this is a great spot. We're going to pause and take a quick break. She's walked us through from being introduced through her now husband's cousin when they're in college, walking us through this point where he's deployed. And I think we can all pause for a moment and maybe imagine with you that picture of your, at the time, young fiance, strong soldier, getting ready to deploy back to Iraq for the second time, strong, stoic, standing on two legs, proudly, eagerly serving his country. And that's the image you have in your mind of the last time you ever saw him, able to stand with legs of his own. So let's pause there, and we're just really excited to come back and have you tell us about the journey that began when he's in Iraq. And like you said, the things you had no way of knowing might then be facing you as you're waving goodbye to your sweetheart on his way overseas. All right, Tiffany, we are back. Thank you so much for helping us get to know a little bit about you and Travis, or Trey as you know him. The sweet story of just knowing that you knew once you got to know him, you knew he was your person, and you've gotten engaged. He's deployed back over to Iraq. You're able to focus on your studies in physical therapy school. And walk us through what happened then. So now we're talking 2007, right? Because he left in 2006. Communication is sparse, but to a degree, your dating relationship had always been at a distance. So you're kind of used to maybe being apart physically from each other and still feeling connected. But back in the early 2000s, like you said, it's not like we had cell phones and texting and FaceTime. He's having to write letters or stand in line at some morale center on base to make a phone call to you. So tell us what happens, and let's walk through that injury that, like you have already alluded to, took your husband's legs and changed the course of both of your lives together.
So February 7th of 2007, I was getting ready for class in the morning, and Trey had called me, which is rare. It didn't happen very often. We had a good conversation, and he wanted to tell me that he was going on a mission and he would be gone for a few weeks, so please don't worry. And we chatted for a little bit, and I had to go because we were having to go to class. So I cut him short, and I was sitting in class because at that point it was all-day class. And about 2 or 3, I started to have this feeling of overwhelming panic. And in general, I'm not an anxiety. I don't have anxiety. I don't feel anxiety. I can handle things fairly well, but I couldn't catch my breath. Something is wrong. And I thought, well, this semester's not as challenging as the last. I wonder what's going on. So the day went on. We didn't think much about it. And I went to Bible study. I had a really good group of friends in PT school, and we had a Bible study, and we were just finishing up, and my mother-in-law called, and we were just finishing up a prayer. So I silenced it, and we were heading out the door, and she called again, and I just knew, I knew something had happened. So I picked up the phone, and she had said, Trey has been injured, and I think he lost a leg. Wow. And I said, what? And of course, tears, all of these doubts. And I just remember wailing, really. And I just wanted her to tell me that he was alive. I didn't care about I cared about his injuries, but my biggest concern was, please tell me he's alive. And I felt really bad for his mom, because since we were not married, I was not considered a family member. And so I had all of these questions for his mom, and she was saying, I didn't even think to ask that. And at that point, they didn't really know the extent of his injuries. They just knew he was injured. So I had such a good group of friends.
Can I pause you? Can I just pause? Sure. I have a question. I'm not military, so I don't know these things. And this is back in a time when it sounds like there's a lot more difficulty in having communication. So I'm just really curious. Is the parents able to call and get some of your questions answered? Or what's the process with that? And are you guys able to have any way to really get more information out? I mean,
well, they were going to call her back. I think she had somebody that she could contact. At that point, I think it was fairly new. They were just really trying to save his life, and they just wanted to let her know that something had happened. I think she had a contact. I'm not sure on her end, but she really was just waiting to get an update and a call when they knew more. So it really was a waiting game. Wow. So I did a lot of prayer. It was a rough night that night. I went to school the next day, and we actually had an exam that day. And my professors, this is one of the things, I'm a very faithful woman, and obviously God is very center in my life. And I feel that God put me at the University of North Dakota because it really was like a second family. They took care of me. They were so supportive. I don't think I could have finished my program at any other program because I've missed so much school. So I'm super thankful that God put me there, and throughout, and I'm sure everybody's journey, they can see that God works miracles and the details of your life before it even happens. And I'm really super thankful for that. So I took my exam because I knew at some point I was going to be headed to either Walter Reed or Germany at that point. They were trying to determine if he was able to make the flight home. So about the next day, Marianne, my mother-in-law, finally called with all of his injuries. And I just remember thinking the list went on forever. So I'll kind of start from the top. I guess this would be a good place to go into what actually happened to him. He was in a Humvee, and they were moving into a new territory, and he was the second vehicle. They were going over a bridge, and they got hit by an IED. So you obviously go into this drill where you speed forward, you look for other people, and they were going over the bridge. It was a choke point. And my husband saw that there was a refrigerator looking figure buried in the ground, and he looked across and he could see the person who was going to detonate it. And this is the one thing that I love so much about Trey is he is a very selfless person, and he had in the past called up IEDs, and they were smaller, and somebody had hit it. He himself made a pact with his guys in his truck that I will do anything to keep anybody alive if it is sacrificial to us. If we have to sacrifice our lives to save others, I will do that. And so if you want to be part of that, you can stay. If not, you can go. And of course, all of them wanted to, they're brothers over there. They want to take care of each other. So his driver started driving over the IED driving around it, excuse me. And my husband said, no, drive over it. And this was not in hopes that they would get hit by the IED, but only, I guess, 2% of IEDs actually hit their target. So he was hoping that it would either detonate right before or detonate after. But that's obviously not what happened. So he drove over it, and it detonated and it ripped the engine out of the Humvee. And thankfully, his gunner dropped down, and his engine landed up on the turret up the top. And the molten copper from the EFP, so as an IED, and then an EFP was in the middle. But pretty much what that is it's molten copper that can just rip through steel. And it went through, so my husband was sitting in the passenger seat, and it ripped a hole right through the floorboard, and it ripped off his left leg. And then his gun was sitting in between his knees. It rotated, wedged into his tibia, which is his shin, and then it melted into the Humvee.
Oh my goodness.
He had separated his pelvis. He broke his elbow. He broke his neck. He shattered his jaw. And they actually had to amputate his right leg to get him out of the vehicle.
So he lost his left leg on impact, and he lost his right leg before they even got him out of the vehicle. So they had
to actually use a hammer to get his leg off to get him out of the Humvee, because they couldn't get the gun, which was soldered to the Humvee, off of the Humvee. Right. So they had to take his leg instead. So
he's taken from Iraq. Did they medevac him into Germany then? Did you end up, was he able to travel?
So yeah, he ended up actually dying 3 times as well. So he sustained a brain injury, and they resuscitated him 3 times. So they took him to Balad, got him stable there, and then flew him to Germany. And he was there until the 11th of February. Well, probably the 10th of February.
So that's just a couple of days.
Couple of
days. Take him to
Germany
to get him stable and make sure he's safe to travel.
That's correct. And then they sent him to Walter Reed February 11th. So his family was flown out there February 11th, picked up. But because I was not married to him, I was not considered family. So my mother-in-law, she knew it was really important for me to be out there, and got a hold of the Yellow Ribbon Foundation, which is a wonderful foundation. They flew me out the next day.
Yeah.
I have a very kind of funny, sad story about that. I think as a loved one of somebody who deploys to Iraq, and Jenny, I know you know this, or Afghanistan, or wherever they go overseas, in your mind, or at least I did, I had this envision of what it would be like on a homecoming. You know, I had never experienced one, but I was really excited for the day that I could see him again, because we were actually going to get married on his mid-tour leave. And that was week after. So we were supposed to get married a week after he got hit.
Oh my goodness. So you were engaged to be married that same month?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And I had just bought my wedding dress the week before. So we were, full force, ready to go. But I got there February 12th, and I woke up really early in the morning. And I want you to know that I didn't sleep well and I didn't eat. This is very important to my story. So I was able to go. He was obviously in the surgical ICU, and they had a little window, and it was 6 a.m. I was able to look at him, kind of take it in first. So when I looked through the little window, the nurses were working with him, trying to keep him comfortable. He had broke his neck, so they had a collar on him. They weren't able to do any surgeries at this point because he was septic. And so they didn't want to do any surgeries due to that infection. It wouldn't have been good.
Right. His body couldn't handle that.
That's right. He had an external fixator on the left arm, so there was wires coming out of his left arm. And then the right arm, he had a wound vac on because they had to do a fasciotomy. If they wouldn't have done that, he would have lost his right arm. And then he was trached because his jaw was shattered, so he had his mouth wired shut. And then obviously his legs were gone. They were longer than what they are now, but he had wound vacs on the ends. Yeah.
So Tiffany, this is, I've kind of known the summary of your story over the past several months when we've been involved in different things together and met each other. I've never heard you say this way, to give this many details, to think of that list of those injuries, to think of how you according to the Army, you're not technically family because you're a fiance, not a wife, and what a difference that makes in your access to him. I'm so grateful that Yellow Ribbon organization was able to get you out to Walter Reed, not only for your sake, but I'm sure for Trey's sake, to be able to have you there, this beautiful, important person that's so much a part of his life. I think we're going to take a break for a minute and soak that all in. And then when we come back, and again, we're short on time, but this is only episode 1. We want you to tell us how you got through, I imagine, the initial shock of seeing him that way, juxtaposed to that image you had seen him standing stoic, getting ready to board the plane and leave, months before. And then what was it like to, in that immediate aftermath, deal with what you were dealing with while knowing he was dealing with so much at the same time? So we will be right back to continue this conversation. And Tiffany, just thank you so much for sharing with us. All right, and we are back with Tiffany Vendela, who is telling us the story of the time that her husband, Travis, who goes by Trey Vendela, was in Iraq serving on a mission in a Humvee, and his team went over an IED that they had spotted. He had spotted, hoping that they could detonate it either before or after he or anyone else went over it. It didn't work out that way. It detonated right on them. He's got this laundry list of horrible wounds and very serious medical conditions to deal with. Tiffany, you're telling us you're now at Walter Reed. You've got this vision of him with all these obviously injuries to his body, hooked up to all of these different machines, literally keeping him alive, not even yet able to have surgery because he's septic. Can you walk us through those next few days, that initial, how you got through that, knowing that then we'll do a to be continued and have you tell us more of the story? Can you kind of give us what's in your mind when you see him, what happens while he's at Walter Reed, how long is he there? Can you tell us a little bit about that chapter?
Sure. So when I went in, I wanted to be as supportive as I could. And I wanted to let him know that things are going to be okay and that I really am going to stay. And that was a really hard thing for me and his mother, that was a big concern on whether I was going to stay or not. I'm a very loyal person. And
when you say stay, are you saying stay in the hospital, or are you saying stay with him?
Stay with him. Yeah, stay with him, because a lot of times, we've seen it a lot through our experiences where people get wounded and wives leave for smaller things. And
or even Tiffany, I know you've seen this too. Even just a deployment that the marriage doesn't make it, even without an injury or something catastrophic. The difficulties of being married to a soldier like that has broken more marriages than anyone in this country would care to admit. So I can't imagine this, knowing, are you going to stay? Was it a hard thing for you to decide, or was it just something you had to convince them that you were serious? Did you go back and forth in your mind, or did you just know from the beginning, I'm not going anywhere?
I knew from the very beginning, and I really had a peace about it. And that'll come later in my story when I say I never had any thought of leaving. And I think me being in physical therapy school, I think that was huge, because I've seen injuries, nothing as catastrophic as Trey, but I've seen people can do things and get better. So I had an educational background on where he could potentially be. The wounds didn't necessarily scare me. What scared me was, because he had such a severe brain injury, I was just worried that he wasn't going to be able to function, because they really told us, because his Glasgow Coma scale was very poor, which means what his brain injury was. We didn't know. And sometimes they thought he could potentially be in assisted living just because of his brain injury was so severe. But I'll rewind and go back to where I went to see him. I went in and I had a big smile on my face, because I wanted him to know I was there. And I wanted him to know that I was there for the long haul, because I knew it would be. And he tried to talk to me. And at that point, his neck was broken. His mouth was wired shut. He was trached, so he couldn't communicate. And he was really confused. So he started thrashing around, like uncontrollably thrashing. And I just it's okay. Tell me later. And then all of a sudden, and this is the best part about, I think God has a humor. I said, I got to go to the bathroom. And then everything just went black.
Well, because you haven't eaten or slept, and the stress of all of this.
Yes,
your poor body said, enough's enough, I'm out.
I passed out. I was gone. So I think it was really funny at that point. We needed something to make us laugh.
Yeah.
And I think we still laugh at that to this day.
I just love how you see, because I'm the same way, when you see these details that so many people would just call a coincidence. And I love how quick you are to say, no, that was God. God did that. God has a sense of humor. And really, I can't imagine the intensity of that moment. He's laying there knowing I'm sure he wants to say to you so many thoughts and feelings, and you're looking at him, this beautiful smile, trying to say to him, I'm here, I got this, and then you're flat on the floor. Okay, honey, wait, you're reassuring me that we're going to be okay? I'm not sure what to do with this.
Lucky for me, he didn't remember that. So he actually didn't remember probably the first, I would say, month. Wow. We had to tell him daily what happened, and that was really heartbreaking. But what's even more heartbreaking is when he actually got it. You could see that it sunk in. So when they come back with wounds or the limbs gone, they don't close them right away, because their tissues die. They have infection. So he went in and out of surgery every other day for 12 washouts, and his limbs kept getting smaller. And this is kind of where I never really thought he was going to die, and I never thought or was worried about him dying but I was worried as a physical therapist, functional wise, like his limbs are getting shorter. He can't use prosthetics.
You're losing capacity.
The doctor coming in, and I just said, his limbs are really short. Can he even be fit for a prosthesis? And he looked at me and he goes, I don't know if he's going to live. And that was a real slap in the face, because I was thinking, what? Of course he's going to live. Like, what are you talking about? And I think that was my first reality of, oh yeah, this is bad. And I knew it was bad, but I really had a peace about him. So he was in Walter Reed for 3 months. He had multiple surgeries. After he was able to get his limbs closed up partially, he had to have some grafts, tissue grafts, skin grafts, because he didn't have enough skin on his legs to close them up. So they took skin from his arm. They did surgery on his arm, but his mouth was still wired shut. And I remember sitting there in the hotel, or not the hotel, but the hospital, hours on end, and we couldn't communicate with him because his mouth was wired shut, his trach was in, and he's not really coherent, and he's in and out. But I remember one time he's trying to tell me something, getting all frustrated, and I went in close, and he grabbed my hair and slammed me to the bed. And I was thinking, oh, okay. And so he started doing combat hand signals. And I thought, oh, like, he's not even here. So he was in and out. He thought he was still in war. But at that point, I had to come back and forth from PT school because I was still doing school. And there was a point where I thought, oh my gosh, do I quit so I can be with him, or do I keep going? And at that point, I knew Trey would be super upset with me if I stopped. He'd be mad that I gave up something that I love for him. And so for us, I chose to keep going to school. So I would fly back and forth from North Dakota to Walter Reed every few weeks. But I'm so grateful for a school who supported us, supported him, and really got me through that. And I look back at the times of trying to go to school and trying to be there for him, because there was so much pain. I mean, just thinking about not being able to roll over in bed, not being able to transfer to go to the bathroom. I mean, there was times I had to wipe him because the nurses were busy and I couldn't stand to see him laying in his bathroom. I couldn't stand it. So a lot of times they go, this is not what I signed up for. Like, I should not be wiping my fiance's butt, just things like that, or screaming in pain and there's nothing you can do. And there's nothing the nurses can do because it's not time for the medication yet. I look back, obviously God and plans, and I always had my mind on, like, this is what life is and it's not easy. But I also know that God put me with Trey because we have a beautiful family. We have a beautiful love, and it's not superficial. It's so, I feel like with the time in that class, and I never went back to that. When I had a panic attack, that was actually the time he got hit. And so I feel like we have a very deep connection, and I look back at the time that we went together, and I can only think of that poem, Footprints in the Sand, where it says, when you see only one set of footprints in the sand, it was then that I was carrying you. And I believe that God got me through school. He got Trey and myself through that time in Walter Reed, and that was a 3-month mark. And at that point, he had gotten his trach out, and he was able to get in a wheelchair and starting rehab, but he chose to be transferred to Brooke Army Medical Center, where he could do an outpatient physical therapy.
And what state is that in? Can you tell our listeners where?
That's in Texas. It's in San Antonio, Texas. So he had, due to his brain injury, his left eye was shifted to the left and he couldn't see. He saw double all the time. But this is, I think, another miracle. So he got on the airplane at Walter Reed. I wasn't able to make that journey. So his sisters and his mom took time to come and be with him. So somebody from his family or myself were able to be there with him, which I think is really important, because people who are in the hospital, I feel like, really need an advocate. They need a voice. And I'm not saying that nurses are bad or doctors are bad, but I think that they're just busy and they miss things. And so it's important to be there with the people that you love so that you can help them through that. And I don't know, Michelle, if you experienced any of that with your husband.
I did, but this is kind of funny. I was also a doula at one point before I was involved in childbirth. And so for 10 years, I supported women in pregnancy in the hospital. And I'm a big advocate for having a extra set of eyes and ears in the room with doctor visits, with hospital stays, because you're right. Nurses are busy. They're in and out of the room. They check on the patient. And when you have a person that's not with it entirely, there's no way that they've understood any orders or conversations about diagnosis, any of those things. They can't grasp onto it. And having an extra eyes and ears, listening and being able to take notes and be able to ask questions, I think is really, really important. And really, I think it's important whether it's cancer, whether it's a massive injury or pregnancy.
Yeah. Right.
So, yeah.
So if we go back to his eyes, I totally didn't finish that, but this is another miracle. So he was going from Walter Reed in Maryland, flown to San Antonio, and his eye popped back. So then he could see. So it's kind of something that we joke about. Sorry, what?
It healed itself.
Yeah. So instead of being shifted to the left, I don't know if it was the pressure of the cabin or what, his eye just centered, and then he could see better. And
well, that was I think flight it's funny taking then.
Not like popping out. No, it didn't pop out of his head.
Yeah.
No.
Right. Like, whoa! But it corrected itself, basically.
It did. But I always look at him when we're flying to see if his eye goes out again.
Kind of like on the cartoons, if you get hit, you lose your ability to remember. If you get hit again, you get it back.
Get it right back.
That's funny.
No, not that dramatic, but yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So Tiffany, tell us, and obviously again, we're gonna to be continued this to get the next 13 years of the story. But in the few minutes that we have remaining today, tell us what it was like, that transition time. You're still in North Dakota. He's now in Texas. What does that look like after 3 months of being inpatient? And maybe walk us through that next little bit and leave us hanging for our to be continued after that.
So I was able to do a clinical at Scott and White, which is in Temple, Texas. So I was finishing up my final year in physical therapy school. So he was at Brooke Army Medical Center in the outpatient unit, and he was in the Fisher House, which again is a wonderful organization that puts soldiers up while they're doing their rehabilitation. And through this time, Trey was getting a little more mobile. He was still very weak. He could at least get in and out of bed by himself. And it started to sink in. And I am very thankful for Trey's mental toughness and his ability to conquer, because I wouldn't be able to do what he does. But there was a point when I would come and visit, and he was really, really, really mean. And it was really annoying, because I thought, what in the heck? Like, I've been here for you. I will be here for you. But I knew, when you pray on it and you think about it, I knew he didn't want me to feel stuck. And he was trying for me to go away. He wanted me to leave because he didn't want to be with himself. Why would I want to be with him? And it came to one head one night when he was just being mean. And I said, stop. I know this is not you. And I know that you don't want me to go. So just stop, because I'm not going anywhere. And I think that was really important for him to hear, because it was a big fear. Why would she want to be with somebody like me? Life is too hard. I mean, just going to rehab was hard. We haven't even experienced life yet, going out to a store, or all of those hurdles that come when you actually have to transition to real life. And I was just really, really adamant about being there for him and trying not to take things personally. And when I had first met him, he was so selfless and it was all about me. But after the injury, it flipped. And I never blamed him for being more self-centered, but it was no longer about me. And I know that sounds kind of bratty, but it was more about him. And I had to put, which I was always about him, but I also felt a little bit left out, less important. So the thing that drew me to him the very most, the part of it was still there, a lot of his energy had to be self. And luckily for me, I was able to realize that it was never intentional. And I remember sitting there thinking, I cannot wait for this to be our new normal, because I knew in my mind that we would get to a new normal. But at that point, it was just, my whole life was just not what I thought it was going to be. It was shattered.
I can't even imagine that. How young were you, Tiffany? I mean, you're still young. You're not even married yet.
I was 24.
So you're not even 25, and you and your fiance at the time saw every dream you ever had shattered. I mean, let's be honest. I've heard your husband speak before at some of these events we've been to, and he said something about he lives in a walking man's world. This world, like you mentioned, you haven't yet been to the grocery store. You haven't had to get in and out of a vehicle.
Right.
Using his own bathroom facilities, taking care of his own just medical needs, cooking food in a kitchen that's designed for people who stand at counter height. And you've got this whole world of dreams. I mean, all of us can think back, all of us who are married or have ever fallen in love. We all have just this dream in our mind of what life will be. And especially when you're young and you're hardworking and you're faithful, you're determined you're going to make a beautiful, good life, which I think is what most of us start with. But we think we know what that looks like. We think it's walking down the aisle and it's the groom standing there waiting for you. And to have literally every dream ripped out from both of you at such a young age. And then to see you, this determined loyalty to stick with him. And to see him trying to give you this out because he doesn't want you to feel stuck with him. And yet the beauty of this, like you said, this deep relationship you have is just so inspiring that you could have left. You could have found somebody else. You could have moved on and said, we'll leave him to struggle with his struggles. And yet how beautiful that you stayed with him even when it was so hard, even when it was hard for him to imagine you staying with him. And the grace that it sounds like you were able to give him and yourself in this journey where, and maybe your medical knowledge was helpful because it let you know, hey, there's potential and you've got kind of awareness of how this physical therapy world works. But maybe that was also a hindrance because, man, you know how this physical therapy world works. You know Right. What a road you've got ahead. I am so excited to hear more, to learn more.
I am too. There's just so many pieces about the story that is so intense. I mean, the injuries themselves. I mean, you said there's a long list, and then you start listing them, and I got a little nauseous, I'll be honest. Some of those descriptions were really hard to take. And, this is a man who's out there fighting for our country. He's fighting for our freedoms. And, we don't really hear the details of these stories very often. And I'm really touched about the sacrifices these young men make. And they're young men.
Yeah.
They're mostly young men.
Well,
and it's hard to hear this story, really. I'm really taken back by it.
Well, and I think of the sacrifice of your family, Tiffany. I mean, obviously, I'm going to be a little partial to a soldier's family, but knowing the role you played, not just after his injury, but in his life, when you share that connection to the person you love and want to spend the rest of your life with, that person becomes a part of everything you do. And you've described Trey as this very selfless person who was willing to drive over the IED so that no one else had to. And he's putting you first, and yet in that moment of putting himself in danger, you're realizing this is a man who is selfless enough he'd sacrifice even his own happily ever after and what he always thought that would look like. And in doing so, he's kind of volunteered your happily ever after. But what a story you have to tell that you still have a happily ever after. And that's where I'm so excited for.
I can't wait to
part 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 10. I mean, we could talk for days. I hope you've written a book. If you haven't, I hope you will. I think your story.
Please do.
Michelle brings up a good point. We don't hear a lot of military stories about how hard it is and the sacrifices, not just for those who die, not just for those who are injured, but those who face the horrors of war. And I understand why we don't want to get into the gory details, and we certainly don't want, everyone to be weighed down too much by that. But I think as Americans, we need to know this is what war looks like. This is the price of freedom for you as a young fiance, for your husband as a strong, physically fit soldier who now is trapped in this body that can't do what it used to do.
And for us to be able to live a life of real opportunity. Yeah. I mean, it's a huge price that these men are paying, and it's humbling to hear the story. I mean, I thank you so much for sharing it. There was a couple things you said that I thought was interesting. Going back to the very beginning, you said your relationship started really on building a relationship by distance. So you didn't have the one thing that sometimes kind of gets in the way of relationships, really, when you put that physical part first before the relationship, before you learn who the person really is. And you also didn't have that physical portion of that relationship that you had to also necessarily grieve knowing what that was. Not to get too personal with you, but I think it's a really interesting part of the story, actually, that you had such a deep, honest connection, soul connection, that you knew that this was the man that you really loved. And that's real love. What you described as real love.
And it's a love that has carried you through, again, to anyone that's ever met Tiffany and even just seen her in a crowd, she stands out with a light. I recognize it with her as the light of God. She has this great faith, and not just the kind of faith where you sit back and say, oh, it'll be okay because I believe, and so it's just going to be okay, but the kind of faith that compels her to action. So, Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to pause your story there with your fiance now in Texas receiving his care while you're finishing up your school training. And when we come back next time, we look forward to you telling us. I mean, obviously, we know you did get married. We know you have children. We're so eager to hear that, but also looking forward to your being willing to share with us the ups and the downs that I'm sure have come with us, that beautiful happily ever after that we're all trying to find.
Thank you so much for having me, and I feel so honored to be here with you both.
Oh, thank you for sharing your story. It's really, it's hard to hear, but it's humbling, and I appreciate you sharing it with us. As a caregiver, I wanted to ask you just one question. I found a song during taking care of my husband, and it's Andrea Day's Rise Up. And that song really gave me strength. Have you heard that song?
I have, yes.
It became an anthem for me because there were days that I just didn't have the strength. And I would listen to that song and think, I can do this. I can get up and do this today. Anyway, listening to the story made me think that is your song. Well, I want to...
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I just am so thankful really for the life that God has given me, just because I think that there's so many struggles in life, and you both have lost your husbands. And to me, that's heartbreaking. I can't even imagine what you guys have to do back here on earth. But I really, I feel so lucky to still have him, even if it's in a different form or different than what we thought. And so I just want to just say how wonderful you both are, and the strength that you both have is incredible.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you for being on here today. We want to ask our listeners to subscribe for free to our podcast. And if you like what you have heard, give us a rating and a review. If you or someone you know has a real story about real life that you're willing to share, send us an email at rrpodcast@ksl.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Relentlessly Resilient. Remember, whatever you do today, remember to be kind. You have no idea the struggles other people are dealing with in their lives.